Right, so tech companies are about to spend an absolute fortune, like an astronomical amount of money, building out artificial intelligence over the next year. It's this massive, historic infrastructure boom, and if you watch the news, it's framed as pure opportunity. But what if I told you that this exact same boom is quietly the reason your electric bill is creeping up, and why your next laptop is about to cost noticeably more? Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to dive into how the sheer, massive scale of corporate AI spending is secretly acting as a hidden tax on your wallet. I'm going to show you exactly how this investment boom is raising costs for ordinary people who aren't seeing a dime of the profit. And, more importantly, how you can position yourself to stop just paying for this boom and actually start protecting your finances. To really grasp the scale of what's happening right now, we have to look at the numbers, and they are wild. On the left side of your screen, you see the entire United States military budget. And on the right, that's the projected spending by tech companies on AI infrastructure for next year. Tech companies are literally projected to spend more building AI than the US spends on its entire defense. It's just an almost unthinkable amount of money. But here's the harsh reality of economics, right? That money has to come from somewhere. That massive build-out has to be paid for. So while the profits are concentrating in the hands of early investors and tech giants, the physical costs of all this expansion are already trickling down and showing up right there in your monthly bills.
Section 1. The trillion-dollar boom and your hidden bill. Okay, let's dive into this macroeconomic data because it tells a fascinating story about how a tech boom happening halfway across the country is directly feeding into your local consumer inflation. It's all about resource consumption, and the resources AI needs the absolute most are power and hardware.
Just look at this single number, 6%. Data centers built to power AI require a staggering amount of electricity just to run and cool all the servers. And over the past year, that massive sudden demand on our power grids has actually pushed electricity prices up nearly 6%. So, when you open your utility bill and wonder why it feels a little heavier this year, even though you haven't really changed your habits? Well, you're looking at the direct downstream effect of the AI data center boom. But this squeeze isn't just about electricity. It's building across the broader tech hardware market, too. If you look at this table, it breaks down the exact sequence of events. First, you've got data centers expanding rapidly, right? And they're scooping up memory and storage chips at this unprecedented rate. Second, this creates an immediate shortage in the market, and the reaction? Consumer costs go up. Apple has already raised prices on iPads and Macs specifically because of these component shortages. Economists have even quantified this stuff. They estimate that every 10% increase in AI hardware costs adds roughly 0.1% to overall consumer inflation. You might not be buying an AI supercomputer, but you are absolutely paying the premium for the parts they require just to buy a basic, everyday laptop. And we really have to contextualize this AI cost bump against the broader economy, because inflation is still a very real factor. The June Consumer Price Index was expected to sit at 3.8% annually, with core inflation hitting 2.9% in May, and on top of all that, effective tariff rates have surged from around 2% to nearly 12% over the past year. Businesses are already squeezing the consumer, which makes this unexpected AI-driven cost hike even more painful to deal with.
Section 2. The bystander effect. Now I want to shift our focus for a second from the macro data to the human element. Why are these specific AI-driven price hikes so incredibly painful for ordinary people right now? Well, it all comes down to the environment in which these costs are hitting us.
We're currently stuck in what economists call a low-hire, low-fire job market. Hiring is hovering near multi-decade lows, and job postings, they've been completely flat for 6 months. So the good news is, people aren't losing their jobs en masse. But the bad news? Almost no one is getting hired for new roles, and real, inflation-adjusted wage growth has actually turned negative. Basically, you aren't getting fired, but your paycheck is buying a little bit less every single month. It's this quiet squeeze. And when wages are stagnant like that, a 6% bump in your electric bill and inflated electronics prices, they hurt profoundly more. And this brilliantly illustrates a pattern that repeats throughout economic history. The quote here really hits the nail on the head. Massive infrastructure booms create enormous wealth for early investors while raising costs for everyone who's just a bystander. It's like the railroads in the 1800s, or the early internet, and now AI. They create enormous wealth for those early, perfectly positioned investors, but they inevitably raise costs for everyone who's just standing on the sidelines. During the railroad boom, the early barons became some of the wealthiest people in human history, while ordinary folks frequently face bankruptcy because of inflated land and freight prices. The AI boom is following the exact same script. So the question that actually matters for your money isn't whether AI is good or bad. It's whether you're positioned as a bystander paying the cost or as someone who is actively protecting their wealth.
Section 3, 5 steps to prepare. Okay, now that we can clearly see the mechanics of this hidden AI tax, let's talk about how we actively plan around it. I'm going to walk you through exactly how to stop being just a bystander absorbing the costs of this technological shift. Here's your high-level playbook. 5 practical financial steps every household should execute to defend their wallets from this ongoing AI infrastructure boom. We're going to audit our electricity exposure, delay non-urgent tech buys, check our current investments, strictly avoid hype stocks, and separate AI inflation in our budgets. Let's break these down one by one.
So step 1 is auditing your exposure to rising electricity costs. If data center demand keeps pushing power prices up in your region, and the projections absolutely say it will, you need to act proactively. Take a few minutes to call your utility company or just check their website and see if they offer fixed-rate plans or off-peak pricing. Fixed-rate plans let you lock in a predictable energy cost for a set period, shielding you from those sudden spikes. Off-peak pricing lets you pay significantly less for power during low-demand hours. Trust me, locking in predictability right now is way cheaper than scrambling to adjust your budget when rates hike again later this year.
Moving on to step 2. Delay non-urgent electronics purchases if you possibly can. Like we saw earlier, that massive data center chip grab is causing real shortages in consumer tech. If your laptop, your tablet, or your phone is still functioning and an upgrade isn't strictly necessary for your work or daily life, hold off. Prices tied to these memory and chip shortages are way more likely to keep climbing than to drop anytime in the next few months. Waiting isn't always the permanent answer for sure, but right now, right in the middle of this supply squeeze, pure urgency should be the deciding factor for buying tech, not just preference.
So, the crucial point is how you handle your investments, which brings us to steps 3 and 4. First, understand what you actually own in this boom. If your retirement accounts or personal investments are in broad index funds, you likely already have a healthy, safe exposure to the major companies driving this infrastructure build-out. Definitely check your portfolio before assuming you're missing out. But step 4 is the big warning. Absolutely do not chase individual AI stocks based on hype alone. Listen, being a bystander who pays higher utility prices is bad. But becoming a bystander who also loses thousands of dollars chasing an overvalued, concentrated bet, that is disastrous. If you want specific exposure, do the deep research. Don't just buy because a company slapped AI on their latest press release.
Finally, step 5. Treat AI-driven inflation as a real, separate, identifiable line item in your household budget. When you sit down to plan your finances, you kind of have to stop lumping every single price increase into one generic bucket called inflation. By recognizing that a specific chunk of your rising costs is coming from an identifiable, ongoing trend, this AI infrastructure build-out, you can better anticipate the future. You'll know exactly which categories, namely electronics and utilities, are most at risk of continuing to rise, and that allows you to allocate your monthly funds with precision rather than panic. The AI boom is going to keep making front-page headlines as the absolute biggest technological and financial opportunity of this decade. And yes, that is absolutely true for the companies and the positioned investors inside of it. But for everyone else, it is quietly becoming one of the biggest hidden costs of this decade. And the difference between those two groups isn't just luck. It's whether you understood what was happening early enough to plan around it. By taking these 5 steps, you take back control. Before you go, drop a comment below this explainer. Have you personally noticed your electricity or electronics costs creeping up this year? I'd love to hear how this macroeconomic shift is hitting your local area. Stay focused, stay prepared, and I'll catch you in the next one.